Hello, everyone. I'm Yanka, and welcome to the podcast. Today, we have a very special guest, Katherine Bormann, a violinist in the Cleveland Orchestra. Earlier this year, Katherine and I were paired as a part of a new mentoring initiative here at New World Symphony in Miami. She's an alumni of New World, and I am currently a violin fellow here. And it was great timing to meet her and get some inspiration during this extremely weird COVID-19 pandemic year. In addition to being a violinist with the Cleveland Orchestra since 2011, Katherine is also the first alumni member of the Board of Trustees for the New World Symphony. She has degrees from Rice University and the Juilliard School, and has made appearances at Strings Music Festival, mainly Mozart Festival, Aspen Music Festival, and Tanglewood Music Festival, where she was also a member of the contemporary music ensemble Neo From Players. She's also a guest lecturer at Baldwin Wallace University and at the University of the Pacific's Conservatory of Music. And over the past few months of getting to know Katherine, we've had some great conversations. So I figured it would be great to have her on the podcast to share her wisdom and perspective with all of you. In the episode, we talk about what it's like to be a musician in a top-tier orchestra and how she maintains her technique, artistry, and inspiration. We also talk about the things outside of music that a musician must do to be their best self, especially the importance of being quiet and going within yourself so that you can better share your art with others. And of course, we talk about the grueling audition process to get a job like this and certain tips she has for getting better at auditions. It was definitely a bit of a music geeky episode, but still I think it's a conversation anyone can enjoy and get something out of, even if you're not a musician. Anyway, it was so great to have her on. Even though she has one of the best music jobs in the country, she's extremely humble and down to earth. And we had a great conversation. So thanks for listening and enjoy this episode with Katherine Bormann. Okay, Katherine, welcome to the podcast. It's so nice to have you.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
So normally we do like a bio type intro before this and record one. But can you give us like a personal version of who you are and what you do generally?
Sure. I am a violinist in the Cleveland Orchestra. I've been here for 10 years. I did my undergrad at Rice University in Houston, went on to grad school at Juilliard, and then spent 4 years at the New World Symphony in Miami, where you are now. So shared experience.
Nice. Yeah. Wonderful. So how'd you start playing the violin?
So my mom got her degree in piano and music therapy. And there were a lot of amateur musicians on both sides of my family. So everybody really loved music. They played piano growing up. A lot of them sang. My dad did a little percussion in high school. So there was a lot of just general enthusiasm and support for music. But my mom thought, since I moved around so much, I was a very energetic, small person. She thought the violin I could take with me wherever I went. So she found a Suzuki teacher for me. And I started when I was about 4 and just kept going with it. I ended up doing my last 2 years of high school at Interlochen Arts Academy in Michigan. Mm-hmm. And so that was a really special place. That was sort of the point in my life where it felt as though I really wanted to try to make a career out of this, or to see if I could have an opportunity for a career in music. It was the tipping point for me. And for the first time in my life, I was around so many international students and had so many friends from other countries and parts of the US. And that was a really exciting thing. And just to be surrounded by other art forms. I mean, Interlochen has dance, drama, creative writing, visual art, all those things. And I think that's kind of how, in an ideal world, the arts should be. They should be surrounded with each other and complementing each other. And it was so inspiring to have other friends just in the thick of their own art form. It was a special place. It was kind of a magical time.
And then you realize all the similarities between them when you're talking to some, we have one of our good friends is a writer. And I'll talk about what we do. And he's like, well, that's exactly the struggle I have with finding the perfect sentence. Or, you write the same sentence and erase it, write it again, erase it. And it's like we do the same thing with our, passages in our music and stuff. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I think when you're kind of engaged in that sort of craftsmanship, you're engaged really with your own mind and how you yourself learn and grow and develop. And so it's a very exciting inward path, as well as being something that you share eventually with the world. So
right. Yeah, we all share the same basic structure to our mind. That's why like he'll always we when I talk to him, you know, he might not hear the same qualities of like trumpet sound or violin sound or something, but he has this concept of voice in writing. Mm-hmm. Like when you read certain writers, they just have such a distinct voice, and you can't quite describe exactly why. It's just, you know it when you see it. It's like when you hear Mahler, you know it's Mahler, right?
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
And he's even gotten good enough to recognize Mahler and
Sibelius and stuff.
He
True.
just intuitively,
Yeah.
Nice. He recognizes their voice. That's beautiful.
Exactly. Yeah. And I don't, he probably would not have been able to do that without the concept first arriving to him through writing, let's say.
Sure.
So my next question was going to be like, was there like a tipping point, like a moment where you developed this like inspiration towards music besides Interlaken? I think you answered my question.
there were maybe a couple different ones. Interlaken just generally was definitely one, but before I went to Interlaken, I played so I grew up in North Dakota, and there was a wonderful community orchestra. And it was just based on, again, local amateurs, doctors and insurance agents and lawyers and teachers, some of the music teachers around town. And we played some pretty big works. We did Shostakovich symphonies and Liszt and Beethoven. And I was pretty young. I was sort of one of the only junior high age kids in the orchestra, and the adults were very nice and very welcoming towards me. And I think it was just being exposed to the great orchestral rep that got me so excited and got me thinking about, well, what if I could do this for a living? What if, and it maybe sounds a little cheesy, but it was pieces like The Great Gate of Kiev in pictures at an exhibition, those really rapturous big things, and, Carmina Burana and Peer Gynt. And I just had such a thrill getting to play those pieces. And that's when I started thinking, gosh, could I do this for a living? Because I would love that. So the repertoire of the orchestral music really drew me in.
That's so nice. I have such a similar story. So it's the first time in my life, it's a little bit different, but same type of inspiration. It's the first time in my life I heard a full orchestra. I was 11, because like in the city that I grew up originally, we didn't have a full orchestra. Like we just had chamber orchestras. So I remember hearing Lalo's Symphonie Espagnole, and I was just like, oh my God, like this is what like this sounds like. It was just so inspiring for me. And I think that was the moment when I thought of like, I need to do this. Like, it was just incredible.
Isn't it gripping? It's and I can understand, sometimes in classical music circles, there are some audience members who really don't like new music. And that's a whole other topic. But sometimes I can sympathize with people who want to hear the same works over and over that they know and love, that they're familiar with, because they return to those familiar pieces again and again. And I mean, that's great. That's wonderful. Of course, we want to encourage our audiences to develop new favorite works, but it's I feel like I can really understand why sometimes people just want to hear those familiar favorites, why those war horses get played so many times, because they are spectacular. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I could never get sick of Tchaikovsky 4.
Yes.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Or the same movies we watch all the time. There's a reason for it, because it's cutting to something deep that is probably below language. If it were like the simple message, like, here's the lesson, blah, 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 blah. It's like, it's every time you watch it, you notice different details and have new favorite moments and take away new lessons or whatever. Yeah.
Absolutely.
We constantly watch Star Wars lately.
I love Star Wars.
Okay, good.
Perfect. We're just like rewatching it for the 20th time. That's awesome.
It's so good. Oh my
really
gosh.
incredible.
Yeah.
We were just playing a brass septet this week at New World, and we were talking about the London Philharmonic principal trumpet, and how that very first note of the episode 4 of Star Wars was his first note playing with them. after he won the job. That slightly sharp B flat was
It really was slightly sharp.
perfectly sharp, I should say.
Like it comes down from B flat. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, really? I did
Maurice
not
something.
know.
I'm forgetting his last name, but yeah.
Oh goodness. Yeah, when we've played those movies out at Blossom, I mean, the audience just goes crazy because again, it's the launch of this epic thing that they're really familiar with, and
Yeah.
it's so thrilling. Yeah.
Yeah, at Tanglewood, they did
that,
where
yeah.
they play along with A New Hope and cut out all the music layer from the movie, but still play the movie.
Yes.
I can't imagine how hard that is for the orchestra to just
I know.
stay on point
they were
for that.
still not cracking a single note after like 2 hours, which was magical. And like we couldn't even find a place to sit at the lawn. It was just one of the most magical Tanglewood moments for me to watch the New Hope and then just listen to it. I don't know.
Absolutely. It's great music. John Williams is truly a genius and one of my favorite. The score to Hook is also absolutely one of my most favorite scores and movies. I grew up with that. I think that came out when I was like 10 or something. And so that's another one that it's kind of ingrained. But
I should revisit that then, yeah.
Yes, The Flight to Neverland. That's so beautiful. One of his best. And Jaws is actually really tricky. We played that one summer, and there's a piece of the score to Jaws that's called the Shark Tank Fugue. And it's surprisingly really tricky. And I think it took some of us by surprise when we had to practice that because it's not easy.
You're like, it's Jaws. It's a minor second. What could go wrong?
Exactly.
That's so funny. Yeah, the inspiration, like, it's funny. I didn't get into Star Wars until I was later. I didn't even know. I watched movie. I didn't connect what a symphony orchestra was in my mind until I was like 17. And my teacher was like, oh, you should audition for this youth orchestra. I'm like, isn't that for strings though? She's like, no, it's a symphony orchestra. I'm like, what's that? Like, I didn't connect like these movie soundtracks. I didn't listen to classical music otherwise. None of my like family is musical or anything. Mm-hmm. And then I went to an orchestra concert. I was like, whoa, like just the way an orchestra sounds when you hear it live for the first time is just like, I mean, I heard, okay orchestras, and then I remember hearing the Chicago Symphony in Carnegie Hall in 11th grade. And I was just like, what the fuck? It was Mahler 1 too, so it was just mind-blowing. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that would be an incredible experience.
Going back to high school band the next morning was a little difficult.
Well, don't you think, I mean, do you find among maybe some of your peers that movies and now a lot of times video games, some of these scores are so involved and complex. That's how some people are coming to classical music.
Yeah, video games. What's this? It's a kind of a funny puzzle game, World of Goo.
Oh God, that's true.
And it has this trumpet theme that I always just warm up on because it has such a good character to it.
Zelda's so cool. I love Zelda's score. I think it's beautiful. But yeah.
When you find a melody, like a great composer finds great melodies, I think, Exactly. And some of these video games or movies, like Star Wars is a space opera, let's be honest.
It's true.
Without singing.
Nice.
Absolutely.
Have you ever played any of those concerts where they actually play the movie and you're playing the soundtrack?
We have done that. We've been doing that the last probably 5 years at least. So they do those in the summer at our summer home at Blossom. They'll do some of the big ones, Harry Potter, Star Wars. We've done also kind of classic films like Singing in the Rain, Casablanca, which is very repetitious. We've done Psycho, North by Northwest. So it kind of tends to be either blockbuster John Williams movies or old time films, and both of those are fun. I think they're hardest perhaps for the conductor because they have to be watching these screens. We don't use click tracks. We just go with the conductor who has to really visually follow along on a monitor in front of them. And so, but audiences love it. And a lot of times the music is great.
It really is.
Some of the times, not so much, probably, but a lot of the
Some
times.
of the times, yes. I think Casablanca, I think that was just extremely repetitious. And so was Psycho. That there was sort of like the knife shower scene music. And then there was this really calm, kind of like minimalist, sort of spooky. It was like one or the other. It was kind of in between.
That's funny. Okay, so my next question is, I was doing a little bit of research / stalking for our episode.
Oh.
And then I found out that Strauss's Rosenkavalier has a special place in you. Yes. I was just curious if you'd like to briefly talk about why that piece is special for you and if there are any other pieces or composers that are near and dear for you.
Sure. Gosh, a lot of times, and you too, I'm sure you get asked, who are your favorite composers or what's your favorite piece? And it's so hard to pin that down to one, like a favorite book or a favorite movie. But Richard Strauss, I feel like he has such soaring, incredibly passionate, moving melodies, and he has really great instrumentation. I feel like the entire orchestra is always showcased with Strauss, and so I feel like you can never go wrong with a piece by him. But the reason why Rosenkavalier is pretty special to me is because when I was in my fourth year at New World, I was living on borrowed time because I didn't have a job, and I was facing the big wide world of auditions, and I was taking auditions everywhere. And the financial crisis of 2008 had happened, the year before. And so there weren't a lot of jobs. And it's been interesting in this pandemic to kind of look at some of the similarities of what nonprofits have gone through and arts organizations and how things just kind of come to a halt for a little bit. It's felt a little eerie to revisit because at that time, orchestras had hiring freezes and they were not hiring subs and they were doing many of the same things that are happening now. So, I was just feeling worried kind of about the future. And we ended up playing in December of 2009, the Rosenkavalier Suite. Mm-hmm. And Mark Wigglesworth conducted. And I always remember him because he had very flashing eyes, and he reminded me of Napoleon. He had a lot of charisma, and he's a man not of super tall stature, but a lot of intensity. And it was such a fun piece to get to play. But we were playing it, and I was just feeling, so sad and thinking, oh gosh, I don't know if I'm ever going to get to audition or get a job. And that piece, just how beautiful it was, stuck with me. I was actually kind of teary on stage as we played it because I thought, gosh, this might be one of my only times in life that I'm going to get to play this piece with an orchestra. And, your friends at New World, the other fellows are around you, and you've had so many great experiences with MTT. And so that kind of caught me at a raw time. And to this day, whenever I get to play that piece again or hear that, I think back and can't imagine how I could be so lucky as to have gotten a job in music and in an orchestra. And it just kind of reminds me how fortunate I've been and how lucky we are as musicians to every day experience these great minds and these incredible hearts and minds of the composers and other musicians and our friends. So it's a reminder of joy.
True, yeah.
It's like attached into your memory that way. Yeah. I love how pieces can do that. If you encounter them either playing or in the audience at the right time when something's happening, and then it just lodges into your brain with that emotion or whatever.
Absolutely.
I remember thinking that having this kind of like zoomed out thing before playing a Mahler 5 concert once and thinking like how many hours of mastery have gone into all the aspects that make this happen, from Mahler himself composing to instrument makers inventing how to do that, to all of us musicians putting in our 15,000 hours to lead up to that point, to the conductor studying not just the music, but everything,
yes,
to the people that run the concert hall that make that balance that budget to even make it happen, and then it all comes together into that thing.
It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, we had an internet glitch
we
there.
had a weird glitch for a second.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's just assume it's
You-
fine. Speaking of all this, like, speaking of all this, like, inspiration towards music and stuff, how has that changed for you over your time, like, being in a professional orchestra? Have you had to re-find that or rediscover that or find new versions of it or whatever?
Oh, that's a great question. Let's see. I think so. Since I've been in the orchestra, which I can't believe, which is scary, the time has gone. The time has gone so fast. I don't understand how it's been. I think the first few years, you're really working so hard to just get through a lot of music and, sort of master the week to week and, try to fit in with your surroundings and getting to know your colleague and getting through the tenure process. And after maybe 5 to 10 years, as I've been told, that you've seen most of the repertoire, certainly not all, but you've seen a lot of it. And you're coming back and revisiting quite a few pieces. And so it's easier in that sense that you're more familiar with what's coming at you. But I think it's important, and what one has to find is, first of all, to keep up with your colleagues. I mean, I find that really inspiring and kind of humbling, is to look around and hear how my colleagues play and to sort of stay sharp, to maintain your technique and to keep working on pieces. That's something that this pandemic has brought home to me. It's actually been very fun to revisit pieces from college or even high school and just to play through some solo repertoire. And, I think it's really nice to be able to do chamber music whenever you can. And I have, over the last years, gotten to do a lot of various things. I would love to have a permanent quartet. I would love to make that happen, maybe. And that's tricky because you come in and ensembles are already kind of formed with people. But chamber music is such an important part of all of our musical lives. So I don't get tired of, I can't imagine myself, you could talk to me in 20 years, I can't imagine myself ever getting tired of what we do. And I think perhaps sometimes some people do. I can't imagine that. Some things you do, perhaps you're aware of more 10 years in. You're aware of the difficulties of maintaining, I think, this pace and this job, and you're aware of sort of the direction managements take, or the direction, you do have to work hard to maintain good relationships with colleagues. And that's even in just a nice way, when you get along with people, when there are wonderful colleagues, you're around each other a lot. And so we go on tours together, or at least we used to, and we will again. And when you go on a tour, you're around each other almost 24/7. We're in the same hotels, same buses, airports, and then you're at work together, and then you're at the hotel, cafeteria, restaurant together. And so sometimes you need longevity and just to remain, to find your own time, your own private time, but also your good relationships with colleagues. And I think that's a long-term process that you don't know until you settle down in an orchestra.
Yeah, it's kind of what you said before about, like, you have to go inward to bring art outward. And sometimes I've been traveling with one group of musicians where I'm like, I gotta just eat dinner by myself in the hotel room. No offense to anyone.
Exactly.
I need to have some me time.
It's true. You need a certain amount of solitude as an artist. I think that's really true. And then you have more energy to bring back to the group.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah. So you and I were talking in the beginning of this year that establishing a routine is so important to survive from this like crazy year. So I was just curious, what were some, you've mentioned you were revisiting some old pieces from high school, but what were some like personal routines that you were doing to like stay sane during COVID?
I did quite a bit of yoga, which was super helpful. And of course, the mental side of that, the meditative part is really good. And I'm not a very flexible person, like probably in any sense. So yoga, for me to do it at home is actually much better than going to a class, because if I go to a class live, nobody's judgmental, but I look around and I can't do a tenth of what the people do, and the instructors, are in these elaborate poses, and I'm just trying to not fall over. So doing yoga at home was a very helpful thing, so I could not judge my own self. I took a lot of. Did you?
Yeah, it was so funny. I took Luke, and then he was just like staring at me, like, "Why are we here?"
They just started the class. I was like, "Oh, this is like my first time ever."
By the way.
By the way.
I understand. Yeah, it is not easy, but that was useful. And I took a lot of walks, and that was, I really felt like sort of Beethoven taking a walk in nature and listening to the birds. And that was very, very peaceful. Working in my yard, working in the garden helped. Practicing scales and practicing old pieces. It felt to me as though, I not that I had lost the joy of that, but I had more time to do it, and more time without any pressure of a deadline, and just to like be with my own sound, and to revisit. I don't know, like to feel the ease of working again with my own mind, or figuring things out in a kind of a puzzle way. It's hard to describe. And I journaled a lot too. I did quite a bit of writing, and I wrote some little fiction on the side for myself, and that was kind of freeing. So
That's so nice.
I write a lot of like stuff, but I find
great.
writing fiction just like there's a block for me. I just like, where the hell do I start from? Like,
have you ever heard of the NaNoWriMo? It's National Novel Writing Month.
no, I haven't.
So this might be your way to get into fiction. Okay. It's this thing a guy in California started, I think, 20 years ago, and all you do is for 1 month you're going to write 50,000 words, a 50,000 word novel.
Oh wow!
And yes, and you don't worry about how terrible it is. In fact, you tell yourself it's going to be awful, but you just do it. And that's why I did this in November, and it was very fun. And you just try to stick to the word count each day. Yeah. And somehow your brain, like a trapeze artist, reaches out and catches you and comes up with the most crazy plots. So yeah.
And then do you share them or publish them as part of this thing, or is it just for you?
You don't have to. It can be just for you. Some people do, but I did not. It was the deep, dark computer writing secret.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I love doing that stream of consciousness type stuff for myself, like more like journaling. Just in my iPhone, I'll like walk and watch the sunset and then just type for 20 minutes or something. But the idea of being like, here's a character I've invented. This is what they're going to do. I'm just like, I don't know. I could probably figure it out if I forced myself, of course, but
I think
it doesn't come natural.
Yeah.
You might try. Let me know if you do it. Yes, you guys could. You might be prime candidates for this.
Is it every November or something?
That's the traditional month to do it in. I think because the weather's bad is why he decided to do it in November. I don't know.
Well, the weather's never bad here.
That's true.
That's true. I know.
We'll do it in August when it's too hot to walk around. Yeah,
probably.
Exactly. Yes, choose the worst weather month for your climate.
So
you mentioned before, like the feeling of during Rosenkavalier, like you were getting emotional on stage. I've had that happen to me a few times, and then I have to sort of like dial it back. I'm like in the middle of playing the end of Mahler 5. I'm like, wait, I won't be able to play these high notes if I'm just like also engaged with the music. Like, is that a conscious thing you found? You have to find this like emotional playing, but also enough detachment to be technically like sound?
For sure. I one of my teachers at Juilliard said to me, when you're playing, you have to be a little cold-blooded. Because if you get lost in the rapture, you're right, it's not technically going to come out and you're going to get distracted. So you have to maintain a percentage of focus and detachment, and just really what are you doing to accomplish the musical mission.
Yeah.
So true. Yeah, I gave myself an injury basically, like just because I couldn't detach. Like especially like I was so moved with like playing Brahms, like just romantic, and the first instinct was to just like grip onto this like for life, just crazy vibrato, and I got injured really badly at the end of that. So I'm trying to detach a little bit. It's very hard to do though when you're so into the music that you're playing. I think I don't know.
I mean, when you're in the audience and you feel certain music, like your body will sort of tense up with the tension of the like Strauss, for example, right? These long tension building things, you're just like, when, and then he arrives, but if you're playing that, you have to stay relaxed. Otherwise you won't get to the end of that lyrical solo or whatever it is,
Exactly. So let me ask you guys this question. I have some colleagues who really don't enjoy playing like Debussy or Ravel because they feel the audience kind of gets the benefit of that it's something, it's not as fun for them to play it. It's more fun to hear. Now, I don't necessarily feel that way, but they do. And I wonder if you guys ever feel that way, or if there are any composers that you'd rather listen to than play.
Oh, that's so interesting. For me, I can answer that immediately. For some reason, Bruckner, I guess. I mean, it's so long, and I'm a violinist. It just is like falling asleep towards the end.
I won't say who, but I remember a musicology teacher, or he's a composer, but I won't say who, but I remember them saying the sentence, Bruckner is bullshit.
Oh, God. No, I mean, I love listening to him. No, I disagree, but I hate playing.
I haven't played a lot of Bruckner, but I know as a brass player, I would be excommunicated if I said anything bad. So, because he writes so much, exposed, loud stuff for brass. But for me, I would think when I listen to Mahler, I'm in a different place than when I play Mahler. I just have to. When I listen to it, I'm not so engaged with even like this is the trumpet part. I'm more like, Mahler's one of those composers I've done a deep dive into and like tried to read about his life so much and watch as many, documentaries about that time period in Vienna and just try to dive into that world. So I feel like I just am in a very different place listening than if I'm just like, all right, I'm playing third trumpet. Here's when we have this together, and I'm just more aware of what to do.
Yes. I totally get that. And it's interesting you mentioned Bruckner because I think your opinion is shared by many people. And what's funny is when I joined this orchestra, we were in the middle of a Bruckner recording cycle because our conductor, Franz Wilserpost, who's Austrian and from Upper Austria and grew up in the area Bruckner had been the organist. We were in the midst of these recordings, and Bruckner, not until I went with the orchestra on tour and we went to St. Florian Abbey in this beautiful church where Bruckner had played and been organist. Not until we played Bruckner there did I really get Bruckner, because he has these symphonies, as you know, where there are these huge pauses, like these giant fermata rests. And when you play those symphonies in St. Florian, that's how long the reverb takes to finish ringing. And so suddenly things like that, it made sense. Suddenly I felt like I connected with Bruckner, and then again, the beauty of those surroundings. And of course, anytime you play more and you learn more, you have a better understanding of whatever it is. But it took me until going there and experiencing Bruckner in his sort of home church. And then his crypt is downstairs. We went to see Bruckner's crypt. And so you kind of felt like his spirit was there somewhere. So that made a difference too.
Wow, that's so amazing. I think takes us to the next question that was in my mind. I was just curious, how important do you think it is to like know the background of the piece? Can you phrase it maybe a little better than I attempted? I don't know.
I don't know. We've noticed like a lot of musicians are just like, this is my job to play the notes on the page and then close the case and go home. And I feel like it's like a great conductor. This week we were playing this piece, and I'll be perfectly honest, it was by Carl Ruggles. It's called Angels. And I was like, this is a weird thing. I learned it and then showed up to the rehearsal, and MTT took the first 15 minutes to just talk about Ruggles and what a weird guy he was. And he sang like the creepy like song he wrote for his kid, like toys, yeah, like, and then he was like, anyways, that's what's going on with this guy in this piece. Like, it's supposed to be creepy angels, like all gathering in a dark, shadowy, like, and we're like, okay. Like, once you spent the time to dive into the background, do you find yourself doing that? I think you were trying to ask, right? Like,
yes,
just getting underneath your main mission of playing notes together and in tune. And
because you told me like Bruckner made so much sense when you had that realization. Like, how far do you go usually to find out what those little things about composers? That's what I was curious about.
That's a really good question. I think, I mean, again, maybe one of the biggest things that has helped me feel a connection to composers is reading their letters, because I guess it's that sort of that primary source. Last year I was reading the letters of Prokofiev, and that was super interesting. And I felt like, I just felt like I knew this person so much more, the details of how he would write things, the things he was interested in, so many mechanical things like typewriters and gadgets that were coming out around that time. And the fact he was in Scientology and that he was, dealing with these headaches on a regular basis. And I mean, there was such a flood of personal connection, but, you guys would have your own stories with this, but again, maybe that tipping point, the first time I sort of got to tap into this sense of knowing the composers and doing research was at Interlochen. And I had this wonderful Russian teacher, Julia Bushkova, who now teaches at University of North Texas. And she was a huge influence, and she still is. And the Russians, I love all Russians because they're so intense and so, uncompromising in terms of their standards. And they are so engaged with beauty and meaning and just intellect, kind of scary sometimes. And I was playing this piece. I was playing Debussy, The Girl with the Flaxen Hair, which I loved because I had heard a Heifetz recording. And one day in a lesson, she leaned back and she said to me, darling, you need to go and do research for next week. And you need to tell me, who was Debussy? When did he live? You need to look up impressionism and the light and the colors and the paintings and so I had to give a report on this piece and Debussy and what it meant. And so I went to the library and I looked up all this stuff, and I came back and talked to her about it. But the whole week I was playing, thinking about impressionism and thinking about light. And anyways, long story short, I played this piece for her. And she was eating an apple because I don't think she ever took lunch breaks. She worked constantly.
It's inefficient.
Yes, I know. She was eating, maybe it was a pear. I think she was eating a pear while I played. And as I played, she stopped and she set the pear down. And I could just feel her attention. She was always paying attention, but I felt her sort of zoom in. And it was a moment I felt like I'd played more musically, more convincingly, because of that learning about Debussy and then having a connection and trying to put these layers of meaning into this very short piece. And so that was sort of the beginning for me of I guess my own musicality or trying to bring something to an audience.
And when you do it that way, where you sort of flood your subconscious with the whole world that the composer was in, it emerges so naturally in your own playing. Like, it's not, if you say, here's how you be musical, phrase it like I just did, and then you just copy it, it's like you'll start to get along the way somewhere. But the other way is to go to the ground floor and then find your own inspiration. That's happened to me over the past couple of years with Bach, because I've been mostly playing Baroque trumpet and doing like deep dives into Bach's life. And, previously the cantatas were like, you just play what's on the page, and modern trumpet players still play Bach like it's like blocks of sound at the right time. It's like there's text, there's religious like praise God type emotion under the music. It's not just,
Yes.
robotic. And that just becomes obvious when you study like the biblical passages and like Bach's writings. Like Bach wrote like very explicitly, like, my mission is to write a complete like music literature to the glory of God.
Yeah.
So even if I'm an atheist, I have to believe in God if I'm going to play Bach, at least for the length of whatever piece I'm playing.
Yeah. You enter their world.
Enter their world, exactly. Yeah. And for composers where that hasn't happened for me yet, I can listen to it and I'm like, all right, I'm not connecting to it, but I bet if I put in the time, I will.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Do you ever, so we were talking about this in lots of other episodes. Do you know something called hedonic adaptation? I'm sure you.
Say that again. What adaptation?
It's called hedonic adaptation.
Hedonic. Oh, hedonic. I'm not really familiar. Yeah.
Okay,
so probably you can explain it better than I do.
It's known as like the happiness treadmill. It means like you get like, I'll give you the example. Like when we arrived in Miami, I was like, whoa, palm trees. Like, this is crazy. And now I'm like, yeah, whatever, palm trees,
So my question was like, does that
you adapt to the things that are new to you? They really excite your body. And then your body always averages back to they call it a set point of happiness.
Okay.
And so if you've played Mahler 5 for the first time, you're like, oh my God, this is great. And then on the 200th time, like, you're not going to have that same spike of like, dopamine hit when you get it or something.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So I was trying to ask, like, does that ever happen to you over the course of some time? Like with specific composers maybe, or like just generally?
Gosh. Yeah. I think that's something that one has to be really careful to kind of guard against in some ways. Of course, there's nothing you can do. The first time you play a Mahler 5, it won't be the same as the other 50 times you play it. So in one sense, there's not a lot you can do to recreate that. Somebody like C.S. Lewis, who was an author I happen to really like, he talks about that, and he kind of says, what we do in life is to just be open to the joy or the experience of the moment, and not try to fit that 500th Mahler 5 into the box that it was the first time, because you can get new joy out of the 500th time. It's not going to be like the first time. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I think it's good to sort of encourage a freshness, or a lot of times gratitude is a part of that, to just even, let's say, perhaps it's a conductor you don't love who's in town and you're playing, and you don't love their interpretation. I think when I face those moments, I can still say, gosh, I like this piece, and okay, he's taking it slower than I would like. Well, today's a day I can really zone in on my intonation, or I can think. You give yourself sort of little side tasks to encourage, again, your own little freshness. And I always feel like sometimes I think people can feel as though the orchestral life, they can be a little condescending at times towards it. They're like, well, it's not a chamber group. You don't have a lot of say in what you do. And that's always irritated me super, super highly, because I feel like ideally an orchestra is just a large chamber group. And yes, it's true that you aren't, as a section violinist, you aren't making the same decisions that a conductor is, or let's say a concertmaster or principal second, but you have a lot of power in your own playing, and you are a part of a musical mission. And it's very hard to be at the back of any section and really feel as though you're contributing, and that you're accurate with the front, and that you are unified with your stand partner. It's a challenge. So I think looking at it that way is another way to kind of find joy and purpose. And it isn't an ego, sort of a trip. It's a more, hopefully it's something more in service to the music.
Yeah, I think once you can shift that mission to be in service to something that's not your own self, it's a lot easier. I know for me, like the concept from meditation called beginner's mind.
Yes.
Like I try to make a mental note if I'm every year playing Handel's Messiah and going over trumpet shell sound again. And it's not like the notes are hard in trumpet shell sound. It's getting through it, having the endurance. And just not just playing the notes like so many trumpet players do. And I try to approach it with beginner's mind, like, okay, what does this mean? Let me build it from the ground up again and forget all of the cobwebs that have grown on it over the years and just see it fresh. It's hard, but you have to put a different kind of effort. It's not just like logging in time type of practicing. It's like going for a walk on the beach and listening to it and trying to see it from a totally new way. And then that inspires a new approach to practicing. And I was about to switch to Turkish. I was about to say falan filan. Jesus.
Amazing. Now you know how I feel like 80% of the time. That's so funny.
I have a question actually for you guys. Now, I think it's interesting, trumpet and violin, that combination of a match.
I do too.
Have you ever considered why this is a good match of instruments and personalities?
I've had two previous girlfriends, and they've both been violinists as well.
So there's a pattern, I guess.
I see.
I would suppose it's probably something like we're both crazy enough to play the instrument we do.
Maybe, right?
And I think we both don't have the like personality requirements that are associated with the instrument negatively. Like trumpet players are just like, it's like
meatheads.
Yeah, exactly. You don't have that. Like I don't want to say violinists are egotistical, but like that's like there's this like weird stereotype. Like I'm so not that, for instance.
No.
So.
We're both outliers from the norm of people who play the instrument. So I think that's probably why we bond more than anything. But I don't know. I'm not sure I could be with a non-musician. That might be tricky.
It might be hard, yeah.
I don't know if there's specific instrument like personality types. Certainly, I mean, there are. But I've always wondered, like, do the personalities find the instruments or do the instruments craft the personalities, or probably a little bit of both?
I know. That's a great question. Have you ever played, there's a kids concert, The Composer is Dead, and it's a children's book, and a composer, Stuckey, wrote music for it. We did that. I think a lot of orchestras have played this for an education concert. But so it's a sort of a detective mystery as to who killed the composer, and it takes you through the different instruments in the orchestra, and it makes some very funny stereotypes come to light. Like first violins who have the more important parts, and second violinists who are more fun at parties.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's really kind of true.
Yeah.
It is, yeah.
Well, if you said, would you rather go to a party at the principal trumpet player's house or the fourth trumpet player's house? I'm going over the fourth trumpet player's house.
Yeah, I'm joining you there.
They're probably a lot more chilled out.
Right? I think so. There's something to it.
I mean, I don't even think I would be happy like with a high pressured principal trumpet job, because you can ask her, like, living with me when I have something really crazy, like I'm just a different person. It puts me into a different
it's hard to even like talk or exist. I'm just usually like, okay, you do your thing. Like, yeah. But I do have the same thing. I think I'm a really good second player, and that's what I enjoy doing. Like, I just love blending. I just love following. Like, just that's what I naturally love doing. But yeah, so I think in that way match, I guess.
Yeah, we're both not just like the stereotype of our instruments. I think we're sort of equally kind of just not at home in our instrument, but yet here we are.
That's awesome. Good for you.
So
It's a good match.
Exactly. I must ask this, of course. Do you have a number one like audition tip or anything?
Oh,
just a personal question.
Yeah.
For the audience.
Gosh, number one audition tip. I guess I would just say, I think the number one thing that is important in an audition is consistency. And that was what I felt like I had to learn. I had to really practice. And I actually turned to a lot of percussionists and brass and wind players, because I felt they were so consistent whenever they had solos in orchestra. And I wanted to get better at, how can I nail this shift every single time and not worry about it? How can I have good sound and get the stroke correct every single time? How can I shift from composer to composer really fast every single time? So I think I think what we should do as musicians is build in reliability. And that is understanding how your brain works, how your physical setup maybe works the best. So it's picking shifts that your body kind of naturally does well. It's picking positions or, just various physical, technical things that your body gravitates towards, playing to your strengths, and then just repeating that in a way that when it comes time to execute, whether it's a performance or it's an audition, you feel very confident in that you're going to be able to do that no matter how tired you are, or if you don't feel well, that you can do it under pressure.
Okay.
Were you more of like a structured audition taker? Like I do this every time, or were you more like, wiggly, more spiritual, like, I'm just going to be there and let it happen kind of?
When the couple of times where I just sort of went with it in a free-flowing way, I did very poorly. Yeah. I found I had to be pretty structured, but I also found that I had to put in a lot of trust and faith, that I couldn't worry too much about the outcome, and that's very hard to do when you need a job, when it counts. It's easy to say, oh well, this is, I can be very free because this is a chamber music concert for people who love music, and they're not musicians. They won't judge too harshly if it's not perfect. I mean, of course, you never want to do that. You want to play your best at any time, but for an audition, I had to do the work, be structured in my thinking, and then I had to somehow really try to hope and let go of the outcome. And that's when I felt like I played the best.
Nice. I love this advice. It's just so this is
good.
like what I need. And also, like, I think the part that you were saying you need to physically find what's working for you is something that I started trying to incorporate the last year or so, especially after this injury that I had. Yeah. I had to change some things because I'm like, this is not working for me. And even though I have this feeling that maybe things are not working like the same for me, like I don't have the same endurance and stuff, like maybe it's partly psychological, maybe it's not. I feel like I'm so much more smart with how I do things. And then that made me improve so much the past year or so. Wouldn't you say?
Awesome.
Like I would always go to him and be like, oh my God, I think today I figured it out.
I made a discovery. It's going to change everything. Look. And I'm like,
say that every day.
Sounds good. You said that yesterday though.
That's wonderful though. Good for you. Yeah. I mean, I think at the time, basically when we get to sort of grad school age, especially, and as we go throughout life, we have to be our own teachers more and more and more. And you can always play for friends and old teachers and colleagues, but I think we have to really sort of be our own best advisors. And as we listen to ourselves to fix things or to make things seem easy and to practice in a way that communicates ease to our audience is a big thing. So
yeah, and to ourselves even, right? Like,
yes,
if I just remind myself that there's a way for this to be easy, then I'm like, it's okay, it's easy. Like, and then it's easier.
That's right. Yeah.
Instead of like fight, I always tell my students, like in a battle between your tiny lip muscles and a piece of metal, the metal will win. But if you get along with it, then you can make something. You can, find a balance and it resonates and rings and everything. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Ready for some bonus questions?
Oh, yes, please.
I mean, these are not like rapid fire questions. Take as much time as you want. But
lightning round.
In 2 words or less, what's the biggest? No. The first one is, what's the biggest thing you can think of that you changed your mind about over the last 10 years?
Ooh, about anything?
Anything, yeah.
Ooh, wow. That's a great question. Have I changed my mind about?
I always love this one. Makes people's faces go, oh crap, let me think.
It's my favorite one. I just love one.
I hate to say it, but like I guess various things in politics of, I don't know if this will make a lot of sense, but I guess I feel like because things in politics are so divided right now, and I feel like there are valid arguments about different issues on both sides, but each side doesn't hear each other and doesn't do a good job of explaining rationally anymore. It feels like there's so little dialogue, and so I guess I feel like I swing. I've always been kind of moderate politically, and I feel like I can understand or sympathize with arguments on both sides. Again, depending on the issue, it's complicated. But I guess I've changed my mind. I feel like there's so little room for thoughtful dialogue and for trying things, for trying whoever's side is in charge, whoever, I feel like we just don't try things in a wholehearted way and analyze how they're working. Yeah. And so to me, as a citizen, I feel more and more confused about what are the right things to do that are going to have any good impact, and how can we bring both sides together. I don't know if that means, I guess I've changed my mind, but I feel like I vacillate into how things could be better. Maybe that's a more accurate description. So I guess I feel kind of discouraged a lot of times.
Yeah, I would totally
in the
agree with
news,
that.
politics.
I've been calling it like politically homeless. That's how I feel.
Yeah,
it's like if you, who was it? Some famous author said like you should be able to play gracefully with ideas, and that means like entertain ideas in a detached and graceful way, not just like this like robotic like ideological. I'm going to just say exactly you must mean this then, instead of just being a little bit more open and slow and less reactive. And I don't see that happening. It might be social media's fault. I don't know. Everybody's like having their own little bubble.
Yeah.
And then the whole way that you think of reality is like, reality is my bubble, but it's like, no, your bubble is crafted by algorithms. Yeah. We're trying to keep you using the apps.
Yeah.
And somebody else's bubble is very different, and they think that is reality. And then when those bubbles are too far apart, you don't even remember that it's talking and creating a shared reality and a shared narrative that is how you even have a country in the first place, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. I think so many people feel this too, and then like they don't even want to say that, because then they'll be like, well, what do you mean exactly? And they'll try to pin you down. Like
it's true. It does feel even almost a little risky to say something like that, because that can be misconstrued. But I guess I'm sort of at the point where I feel like our public servants should be more servants, and and I guess there is so much in politics now that's attached to money and longer terms and offices and corporations and things like that I guess that's what I find becoming more and more of a problem, that there's a prize in public office, and that seems kind of a spooky thing. And so, I guess I want to see a return of real dialogue and ideas and thoughtfulness and respect. And, we hope that can happen. So we'll see.
And I was learning sometime over the past year that the word dialogue is dialogos. It means two. Logos is like your truth. It's not you trying to manipulate and win an argument. It's between you and your conscience, what is true, and then interacting that with another logos and then reaching some shared consensus. Yeah. That's not at all what happens in public discourse. It's all this pre-calculated, like manipulative language.
Right.
And it's certainly left us feeling politically homeless. It's like, well, I don't know what I am now.
I never knew, like back home either. Like it was always so polarized, but And
there are buzzwords, so you have to be very careful about what words you say, because words just take on this meaning. And now if you say certain words, it's just assumed. Yeah. It's like, well, so everybody's like tiptoes when they talk about politics. It's a very weird time.
That's true.
Absolutely.
Okay. let's move on to a fun question. So,
Existential risk aside.
Yes.
Yes.
That was so great. Okay. So without getting in trouble, naming names and stuff, what was the craziest thing you ever witnessed in your field?
Oh. Gosh. Okay. So we had a guest conductor who shall remain nameless, who's a very talented and a very important person. And we were playing, we were in rehearsal, and one of our colleagues, one of our principal colleagues, asked this conductor for some clarification on, would you like this sort of long or short? A question kind of like that. And the conductor proceeded to give a very elaborate, very over-the-top response to this very simple question. And so the colleague of ours said, well, okay, but would you like it sort of long or short? And so I think perhaps the conductor took some offense to that comment, that question. And we played it again through, and the conductor said something a little salty back to our colleague. And within seconds, within just half a second maybe of this conductor's salty response, you could feel the entire orchestra come together as like one. It was like a Three Musketeers moment that I mean, perhaps this colleague, could have even more gracefully phrased their question. But as soon as the conductor was less than polite to one of our own, we just banded together. It was an invisible drawing of swords. And I've never experienced something so quick that conductor was out of line and we were going to protect our own. I've never seen anything quite like that.
That's funny.
Wow.
Especially as a guest conductor, I guess, right? You're just like, bro, it's us.
I'm assuming he didn't come back.
Not since. And then, of course, I mean, I probably really can't say this story, but there was a time MTT broke a baton on stage when I was a fellow. And that was a very spooky experience. And that's probably the scariest thing I have ever seen.
Broke it like hit into something, or broke it like
snapped
it. Oh,
snapped in half in a moment of extreme anger and pretty justified. Yes.
Oh,
wow. I can't imagine him. I mean, I don't know him well yet, but yeah.
There was an instance. It was I think a justified anger, but it was also super scary. It was Shostakovich 5. So
okay.
Well, that piece makes you a
Brings
base level of anger and
yes, exactly
Russian anger.
Yes, big time.
All right, if it wasn't violin or another string instrument, can you see yourself playing any other instrument? Does one pop into your mind?
Gosh, maybe the piano. Maybe.
Seems like a good one to know. Like it's really versatile.
I love the repertoire, and my mom did that. I think I would enjoy the piano. But for
me, it's like I used to play piano a lot, and I've just gotten rustier and rustier. But the idea of just being able to sit down at home and just play a complete piece that isn't missing parts or something,
Exactly. Yeah. No intonation.
Yeah,
exactly. Yes.
That's the best part. Yeah.
The best. So. Yeah.
Just forget about that whole category in your mind. It's like if the piano's in tune, buy an electric keyboard, you never have to tune it.
Exactly.
Perfect. Okay. Last question. When can you remember laughing the hardest in life?
Oh.
Or recently? I don't know.
So one of my colleagues in the orchestra, Isabel Troutwine.
Oh, I love her. We just saw her like 2 days ago.
Yes. So she coaches at New World a lot. She was herself a New World Fellow. She is probably the person that makes me frequently laugh to the point of stomach cramps on a regular basis. And whether that's her stories, because she tells very hilarious stories, things that have happened on orchestra tours. She tells incredible jokes. But probably the time I've laughed the hardest is when she and some other Cleveland Orchestra friends and I were at New World to play a side-by-side a few years ago. And we were in this tiny little, imagine a Miami rooftop swimming pool that's very shallow. It's kind of like a kiddie pool. And she had this idea that the two of us could have races across this long, shallow pool with our feet in the air and just moving with our hands underneath this kiddie pool. And I about died, and I even laughed thinking about this. I that was the time in my life that I think I laughed for about an hour without stopping. And there's a picture of this somewhere. You have to ask Isabel.
Or you stop for like 10 seconds. You're like, "Oh, I got it," and then it comes right back. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
I love those. Your body knows, like, all right, you're going to actually die if you don't stop and breathe for a second.
Exactly. Isabel can make people laugh that way.
And then your abs the next day are sore as if you did a workout.
That's so true.
It's true. Crunches. Yes.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
Well, thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah.
This was
Thank
fun
you.
conversation. Yeah.
Thanks so much, you guys. It's good to meet you and good to see you again. And I appreciate you having me on. So
All right.
thank you.
This should come out sometime this week. I have a pretty open schedule, so I should get to it. Theoretically, unless we sit by the pool.
yeah, have foot races. Yes.
Yeah,
you can do that.
Exactly.
Well, good to see you guys. Thanks so much. I
All right.
appreciate
Have
it.
a good
Thank
one.
you.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
All right. Thanks for listening to this episode of Exploring Kodawari. If you enjoyed it, we hope you'll consider sharing it on social media and with friends. You can also help us out by leaving a rating and a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Those help us more than you would think. And if you'd like to help us out in a more substantial way, consider going over to our website to make a donation through PayPal. Links are in the episode notes for this. You can do this as a one-time donation or a recurring monthly donation. All of that support will help us to set aside time in order to create content for the podcast and the blog. And finally, please get in touch with us and say hi, either on social media or privately through email. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.